Gold and silver horizons, expert forecasts for the short, medium and long term. Hi everyone and welcome to Ainslie Insights, brought to you by ainslie.com.au, the home of Ainslie Bullion, Ainslie Crypto, Ainslie Wealth and the Gold and Silver Standard. Be sure to have a look. Today, welcome back Bailey, who's been looking at some of these forecasts. He's got his own opinions on things, but also been doing a lot of research. And at this period where we've got gold and silver hitting record highs, everyone seems to have an opinion. We seem to be getting lots of official forecasts, lots of unofficial forecasts. How are you going today, Bailey?
Very good, Chris. I always have lots of opinions, so I'm happy to be here to share them with everyone.
You do indeed. Look, let's start off today with the short term. We've seen, it's undeniable that we've seen gold and silver at record highs, and they got there very quickly. We saw big breakouts, significant moves. That's led a lot of people to predict that maybe it's got too far ahead of itself. We're going to see big crashes. You've got other people saying, no, this is just the breakout. It can go much further from here. What's your take? What are you hearing?
Yeah, and I think we're getting a lot of extreme opinions both ways, because I think that is reflective of the move, as you mentioned. It has been a very extreme move, particularly for metals. You know, the chart, we were talking about it the other day. The chart looks like a Bitcoin chart. It's just exploded upwards. So obviously that leads to a lot of people trying to work out what is going to happen next. I mean, look, in the short term, I believe that we are in for some more volatility with any of these sorts of runs, and we've seen a few of them in multiple of the markets that we cover. Particularly, we more expected in crypto, but nothing goes up and right forever. So that's the first thing that we need to remember. Now, how far up before we see a red candle? We've looks like we maybe have started to see a little bit of that just coming into the market just on Friday afternoon, but. That's the first thing that I think everyone has to just understand is nothing goes up forever, but it's about when. when does that market have a turnaround? Now, the beauty of bullion is that whatever that pullback is, it's about how sharp it's going to be. And time again, gold particularly has held up in those pullbacks. So there are support levels around the 2,600 US level if you care for the technical analysis, but there is still so much geopolitical tension around the world. We've got wars in many countries. We've got still the same sentiment that caused this run can cause the volatility the other way. So I think caution is advised, but isn't necessarily panic is not necessarily advised, I don't think. So I'm of the mindset that in the short term, we can expect a little bit of red might bleed through here, and we need to be prepared for that. But I think as we move into a more medium-term outlook, I think this is actually a great thing for metals. But we just have to remember that what goes up sometimes comes down. So we do just have to be cautious of that in the short term. But that presents a lot of opportunities for investors going forward.
And that's very interesting, because when you think about the opportunity there, I know a lot of people watching this will be rightly concerned that this move is a little bit different to some in the past, that we're starting to see an actual breakdown in confidence in some of these political institutions, whether it's US government debt in particular. I mean, that's one I like to talk about a lot, where you see, okay, there's no end in sight to the printing. There's no end in sight to that particular chart going up and to the right forever. That's one that sort of defies, it just doesn't come down. There's no indication that's going to come down at all. So yes, you could get some volatility in the short term around that with things like gold and silver, but a lot of people are arguing when you start to shift that focus to medium and longer term that there's still a lot of catch up to be played by the precious metals to really replace some of that debt. We've seen central banks doing that for a long period of time now, accumulating while it was much cheaper. Is this just everyone else's opportunity to get on board that longer term? And does that wedge into what you were saying about the shorter term volatility? How do you think about that?
Yeah. Oh man, I think this is, as I said, I think this is great long term for the metals market, and I think everything you've said is correct. I think the global landscape and the financial landscape, I would argue that is only going to get worse, and I think we're going to see more moves like this across a lot of assets, not just gold and silver. But I think the fact that this is happening with the quote unquote stable long term assets that have had this massive run, I think is a sign of the times. So I just the only reason I advise caution is I'm not saying that you should make these drastic moves or sell your metal or anything like that. I'm actually arguing the opposite. I'm just moderating expectations when you see a green candle on the weekly for gold that large, that sometimes there can be a red candle. But I completely agree with you 100% that a breakout move like this leads to or eyes being on that market. Now, I think everyone's always sort of looks at gold, they sort of look at silver, and it's always there. But I think, particularly from the empirical point of view, from the Ainslie point of view, we have seen a lot of intake of new retail customers, and that's also combined with. At the moment, the wholesale is struggling to keep up with that. Now, you don't have to have done a lot of economics to understand supply and demand. So you do the maths on that, and I think that's what's resulted in this run. And you multiply that out on a global scale with large institutions and governments buying it up by the tons. That's how you get this move. But what you also get from that is stability longer term. That maybe we won't get another huge green candle tomorrow. Maybe we will. But what we will find is that now that there are more people in the market, that is always good for any market longer term. I think people always think of gold as this, it almost is purely a wholesale, paper investment for a lot of people, which is kind of funny because it's a physical metal. But the uptick in retail bleeds through to it being into the global narrative. It bleeds through into the media, and we are starting to see that. And that starts to turn it into maybe a different asset. Maybe it isn't just boring old little gold that you got to have 30% of in your portfolio to protect the rest of your portfolio. Maybe this does start to change how the asset is actually seen in the global narrative, and that narrative, as we know, is very powerful. So,
and this isn't just people, like in quotes, saying this, because we've seen recently Bank of America came out, they updated their forecast for next year, talking about $7,700 in Aussie terms for gold and $1,000 for silver. Now, sorry, $1,000, $100. $1,000 is not the Bank of America forecast.
Bye.
But you see some of these numbers and you go, well, we sort of are approaching that, particularly with silver, that we're getting in the ballpark of that number. That could be them saying, well, and they tend to be quite conservative on this, them saying there's still room to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I mentioned, these runs, it's a matter. There's going to be a red candle, but when? Right? That we could, the way that this market has been going, we could genuinely have that within the next week or 2 weeks. Which sounds, if you told me you were talking about Bitcoin, I'd go, yeah, sure. But we're talking about gold now, so I think that is what I'm talking about when I talk about changing the narrative around gold. That is a real possibility. And I think people do get caught up in the hype a little bit, and it's going to crash, it's going to keep going forever. What we do know for sure is that the outlook that got us here, that got us into this move on gold, and to a lesser extent silver, but mostly gold, that hasn't changed. We are still seeing de-dollarization trends. We are still seeing constant inflation. Global liquidity is the main metric to look. And when you look at any of the charts, particularly the ones that you put out frequently, Chris, that weekly global liquidity number continues to climb because governments need to debase their, particularly the US dollar, they need to debase it to pay the debts that they just keep increasing. So we know all this. This is not new. And in many ways, even though us in the industry who see it every day, we have still been taken aback by how aggressive this move has been, but we have also been calling for it for quite a while. So we shouldn't be shocked, but yet we still are because of the gravity of it and how sort of suddenly it's come to fruition. So I think that sheer fact that the long-term outlook on gold, we've just seen, as you said, a lot of catch up on that. The long-term outlook is still the same because it's not like tomorrow all of a sudden we click our fingers and everything's amazing in the world again, and all our paper money is now backed by whatnot, and we've had a reset. No, that's not happening tomorrow. So we need to strap in for the long term. But we just need to advise caution around portfolios at such crazy moves like this.
Yeah, and I suppose that's the level of confidence people can have in the longer term nature of their investment, is particularly the dollar cost averaging. It's something we talk about quite a bit. If you're dollar cost averaging into this, it doesn't matter particularly what you pay on any given day because you catch the dips and you catch the runs as well. It allows you to average out something that we know longer term
Mm.
is almost mathematically certain to
Mm.
continue heading up and to the right over the longer term horizon.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. I've worked with Ainslie for 8 years now, and that has always been well before I started, and I would think it will be well after. Is it doesn't matter that we've had this crazy move in metals at the moment. I think that the strategy that I would be choosing around metals, that I am choosing around metals, hasn't changed. I'm not making any different decisions at the moment, whether this move is stops tomorrow or whether it continues to go. My strategy with metals is the same because I think the narrative around the metal might change. I think all that does is accelerate what we've already always known, which is that this is a long-term asset. It's been a lot short-term in the last few weeks, but it is a long-term asset that you accumulate as a savings, as a protection. It's certainly proving itself as more efficient as a yielding investment. Currently, we're seeing a live example of that, but if you go in approaching it that way, that's where I think the caution needs to be advised. If you're going to, do large leverage trades on gold and silver, that's great. You can do that, and I hope that works out well for you. But I think mindset is the most important thing when it comes to any investing, but particularly metals, because if the narrative does change on metals, we might get more volatility with particularly gold, which is unexpected. Silver, we tend to get quite a bit of volatility anyway, but we might start getting these larger moves with gold. But I think everyone just has to take a step back, remember what they have gold in their portfolio for, why they have it. It's just happening at a much more rapid pace at the moment. So the long-term outlook is still exactly the same. As you said, it's as close to a mathematical certainty as you can get with an asset, which gives you mental flexibility around how you want to frame that in your portfolio, I think.
That's a really good way to frame it. It's something that you don't get in many other assets, and we can talk about that
Mm.
a bit more. But I wanted to dig into, while I have you, gold versus silver here, because I know people who've been following Insights for a while will know Drew's sort of perspective on this, suggesting that we can go for decades with that gold silver ratio falling, and we're just used to gold being at a high multiple at the moment, sort of sitting in that 80s area. But he's suggesting it can sit in the 30s for many, many
Mm.
years, for decades even, that really long-term view. When you look at what silver has done, gold had broken out of that sort of cup and handle, that long-term pattern, and really broken out quite spectacularly as we were expecting. Silver is, in many ways, has been playing catch up to that. How do you think about sort of the Drew perspective here, the
Mm.
longer term, really silver could outperform gold by many multiples to come? Is that something you subscribe to? How do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely could. It definitely could. I still think, to go back to my talk about the narrative changing, is I still think that silver has too many variables which can play in its favor or against its favor. So a lot of what we were talking about, these recessionary issues that could come up that are good for gold, may not actually necessarily be as good for silver because it is an industrial product. It is used in a lot of things. Now,
Mm.
the notion of that is actually often quite positive in that, as you need more supply and therefore there is more demand as the economy grows. But if we go through a recessionary period and there are a lot of businesses, it's used in a lot of EVs, renewables, and all these things, if we go through sort of quite a rapid, recessionary event, which we think, short memories, that won't happen. We had one 5 years ago, and silver outperformed, in fairness. But if we go through a situation where a lot of these businesses are perhaps not needing the silver as much because they're trying to survive, well, that's something you have to take into consideration. I do, however, think that silver has been playing catch up for a very long time. I just had to preface that with a holistic view, just to give you my actual view. Which, yes, I believe that long term it will absolutely play some catch up, because I think that the trends that I mentioned and what silver is being used in is only starting to rapidly increase. So you get the double whammy with silver. Now there are a lot of I won't go into it here, but all of the articles and the stories about the paper not matching the physical and all of that sort of stuff as well. I do subscribe to that notion as well. So I do believe that over time we will see silver play catch up. I think it's such a good problem to have, because my personal view is that the only reason that silver may not play catch up is if gold continues to outperform. and that's a
Yeah,
really exciting prospect. That's an
because
exciting
you're winning either in that scenario. Yeah.
which horse is going to be the faster horse? You've bet on both of them, so it doesn't really matter. So it's that's my I could be not really going into the technical side of it, but just to sort of give the layman's holistic view, that's sort of a broad way of how I see that playing out, particularly in the long term. Short term, I'm not going to make a call short term one way or another. I don't think anyone can at the moment. I think you just have to stick to your plan. You have to make sure your mindset around it is correct. And I think just be ready to zig and zag in times of volatility like this.
I do have one more question just to follow up specifically on silver, because I know you're in a unique position to potentially answer this for us. We've got a lot of people talking about silver squeeze, which is there's clear evidence that something is happening short term in relation to that. You talked about supply and demand. Is it difficult to get silver at the moment? Is it like, is there some weight to this from what you see working the treasury, working with the metals day to day, that there are actually supply constraints?
Well, yes, and I'll say that with an asterisk. Yes, obviously, I'm not going to comment on the global situation and paper metals and all that. But from a localized view, we at Ainslie, we always are prepared for events like this because we have been through a few of them now. Even
Yeah.
in just my time in there, I've as I said, 8 years. I've been through at least 4 of what I would call these style situations, these runs on metals, particularly silver. And in all of those times, we have never had issues with supplying the silver that we sell. Um, the problem with particularly silver is it's heavy, right? That's just what it comes down to. It is heavy. It is harder to produce. It is harder to transport. Logistically, as you sell more of it, particularly if you're getting smaller denominations, that can take a really long time to make for the refiners. They get backlogged. It takes them they're working very long hours. The transport gets clogged, so it just creates this massive bottleneck. So from a squeeze, from a literal point of view, yes, I would say we are experiencing that right now. I think that's a very big part of this price increase, because once you start to see, silver, you can't get silver. Well, what does that do to the psychology of the market? Well, you want to get it while you can. So it just creates this balloon effect. The reason I asterisk it is because at the moment we are still supplying silver, and I think that we're doing a fairly good job of that. And I think that the industry is definitely feeling it, though. That much is very evident. All of our refiners, suppliers, even Perth Mint. You just have a look at their website. You cannot hide it. There is definitely a strain on the industry at the moment. From a personal, localized point of view, my experience on that is that purely comes down to the logistics of the production of the metal. The access to silver currently is fine for us, but as I said at the start of this episode, we don't know how long this is going to go on for. This could go on for 1 week. We're in the midst of Diwali as of recording this video, so that's also going to put a bit of a strain on supply. So we could be in this run for another several months, and maybe the outlook will be different then. So I think that's why people are buying while they can. But certainly from how we operate and have always operated, this is not new to us. Put it that way. Definitely not new to us. We try and prepare well in advance. It's just there are just realities with several 100 tons of metal having to be moved around the country that I think people don't always necessarily have it front of mind. So I suppose that was a bit of a yes and no, but that really is the situation at the moment.
Yeah, that's valuable information to know. And I think your point about it depends how long it goes for is a really valid one. Some people may be very happy with the fact that they've been purchasing at what would seem like the highs. If we find that this continues for another couple of months and there really is no supply anywhere, because we have also been in that situation before. I remember that very vividly during COVID as an example, where there was just no physical supply. You had to wait for many months.
You had to wait. It was
to
all
get
there.
delivery.
It was just, it was all there. Just had to be poured and delivered. And that was a long, long backlog, unfortunately.
And if it continues going, that's where people get concerned. So, I mean, it's a valid concern.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no doubt. And I think that that does have to play a factor in your decisions. All that aside, you still can't be emotional about it, I believe, but it's just something you do have to consider. It's just something to consider.
Look, Really appreciating your insights into this, Bailey. It's great having you on and your ability to sort of tell us a little bit behind the scenes of how all this works. So really value that. And I know our viewers will as well. So thank you for your work on that.
No worries. Hope so. Thanks for having me, guys. Cheers.
Thanks everyone for watching. We'll chat again soon.